comfortably predictable. Mornings started with sunlight streaming through the suburban curtains, followed by the familiar sounds of breakfast preparations, and evenings filled with relaxing pastimes or the occasional chat with my daughters, Cindy and Sandy. The twins, as everyone called them, were the brightest parts of our home. They recently left for Columbia University, and their absence brought an unfamiliar quiet to the house. Marcy, my wife of 25 years, was more than just my partner. She was an essential part of me. We shared everything from the highs and lows of raising our daughters to the routine of grocery lists and weekend plans, yet even the most stable life can hide cracks that only become visible when it's too late. I clung to an illusion of contentment, even as subtle signs hinted at an unsettling reality beneath the surface. One evening, I sat motionless, as if frozen, while Marcy spoke. Her voice, detached and devoid of emotion, broke the silence. "I'm filing for divorce." The words reverberated around the room, but only fragments registered in my mind. "Gary, are you listening? You seem lost. Please, focus. This is important," Marcy urged, her tone sharpening. Snapping out of my stupor, I stammered, "I'm sorry, I missed that last part. What did you say?" "The terms are simple," she continued. "There's nothing to contest. I don't want anything from you. You can keep the house, the cars, and the bank account. If you sign now, everything will be final in 3 months." Stunned, I sat in silence. Marcy and I had been married since high school. Together, we raised our twin daughters, Cindy and Sandy, who had gone on to study international banking at Columbia University. We built a life in a comfortable suburban home, both driving Volvos. Marcy had her own credit cards and cell phone. I had never denied her anything. I never cheated, never raised my voice. There had been no signs of discontent from her. I hadn't seen this coming. Maybe that was the issue. I hadn't been paying attention. "I understand the logistics of divorce, Marcy, but why? I need to know why, even if it's too late to change anything," I said. Marcy slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, her reluctance palpable. She looked as if she wished I would just sign the papers and let her leave without any further discussion. "Just tell me, Marcy," I pleaded. "What did I do wrong?" Her eyes met mine, filled with an odd mix of regret and resolve. "You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You were the perfect husband. Sometimes I wished you'd mess up so I'd have an excuse to leave. But you never did. You were wonderful with the girls, supportive through their college years. You always gave me what I wanted, even when it was unreasonable. You bought me a beautiful home. My parents love you. Don't think for a moment this is your fault, because it isn't." I took in her appearance as she spoke, her smooth, unlined skin, light brown hair gleaming in the sun, the result of her regular jogging sessions that kept her fit and tanned. She could switch effortlessly between a casual Land's End look and sophisticated elegance when the occasion demanded. Marcy was as perfect as she claimed I was, but I couldn't grasp the reason behind her decision. "I'm sorry, Marcy, this doesn't make sense. You can't just say everything is fine and then leave. There has to be a reason," I said, the frustration bleeding into my voice. She hesitated, as if battling with herself. Finally, she spoke. "Gary, I'm trying to do this without hurting you or making myself look bad. Let's leave it at that." Her pause was brief before she added, "No, Gary, I met someone else. He's a real estate developer. He has an apartment overlooking the river and drives a black Mercedes. He's attractive, wealthy, and completely in love with me. You were and still are a grocery clerk at the supermarket. I don't mean to belittle your job. You've always provided for us and kept us comfortable. But that's who you'll always be, and I wanted more. You seemed content." The room fell silent again, this time with the finality of her words sinking in. It stung. Although I was the manager of the grocery department, to Marcy, I was still just a clerk. I had turned down opportunities to advance and relocate, prioritizing our family instead. And now this was my reward. The pain was there, but I kept it to myself. "Does this rich, handsome guy have a name?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. "Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development Company," she replied. "How long have you known him?" I pressed. 6 months, she said, her gaze shifting away. "You slept with him?" The question hung in the air. Marcy straightened in her chair, her eyes darting around the room before finally locking onto mine. "Yes. I was trying to avoid the topic, but since you insist, yes, while we were still married. Yes, I cheated. I was unfaithful. Does that satisfy you?" I paused, absorbing her confession, then picked up the divorce papers. I signed in 3 places, initialed twice, and slid them across the table to her. I guess he's better than I am. Sorry to let you down, I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. As I stood to leave the room, Marcy shouted, "No, that's not it. He isn't better than you. He's just different. Don't you walk away thinking that, Gary. Don't you dare." I was already out the door by then. I was so caught up in my work and hobbies that I hadn't even noticed Marcy gradually moving her things out. By the time she handed me the divorce papers, most of her clothes and personal items were already at Clayton's apartment. She had kindly left all the wedding and family photos behind for me to keep. When I returned home, she was gone. Her Volvo was still in the driveway, and I assumed she wouldn't need it anymore. On the kitchen table, she left a power of attorney to sell the house and car. I spent the rest of the night finishing the beer in the fridge. By then, I knew it was over, with no chance of going back, and I didn't want to. Marcy was gone for good. The next morning, I called my job and took 3 months of overdue vacation. Work had been urging me to take time off, so it wasn't an issue. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave saved up. I called the girls at college and explained briefly that we were separating, refusing to provide more details. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new number. I had 3 months to figure out what I would do next. I disconnected my landline, changed my cell phone number, and canceled Marcy's. The Volvo dealership gave me the low book value for her car. A high school friend, Terry Davis, who was now a real estate broker, agreed to sell the house without listing it, at a low price and for a quick settlement. I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed out my life insurance policies. It was time to set things straight. I went through the house and gathered anything that might belong to Marcy. There was enough to fill 3 trash bags. I packed up the girls' belongings into boxes and stored them in the closet by the house. I spent 3 hours sorting family photos, keeping pictures of the girls for them and tossing those of Marcy into the trash. It was a bit irrational, I knew, but I didn't care. The biggest challenge was my lack of direction. I didn't know what I would do after those 3 months. Would I stay or leave? Would I keep working or try something new? I had 2 hobbies, collecting Indian head scents, which I bought and sold on eBay, and geocaching, which gave me a reason to go outside and stay active. Marcy had hated it due to the ticks, poison ivy, and walking involved. Neither hobby seemed like a viable way to make a living. When not preoccupied with hobbies, I read the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gifted me a subscription each Christmas. Although I wasn't interested in stocks or bonds, I read everything about farm commodities and knew more about sugar, wheat, and corn than many analysts. It was just a hobby. I hadn't invested a dime in any of it. I looked up everything I could on Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis managed to get more details about Clayton's latest project from a friend at a local bank. I was eager to see what he found out. 7 weeks had passed without any word from Marcy. The girls called every week, but there was no contact from her. I felt they supported me, but Marcy was their mom, so they likely had to stand by her in some way. I held a few yard sales and got rid of a lot of stuff, leaving just enough furniture to show the house well for potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's picture appeared in the society section of the Sunday newspaper. They were at a political event, sipping wine with local figures. More weeks passed, and Terry presented an offer on the house. It was lower than the appraisal, but it would close in 60 days, which suited me. He also had an interesting profile of Clayton and wanted to go over it. We set a lunch meeting. I needed to step out for a bit. Hayes Mountain was one of the top spots for hiking and geocaching in the area. I'd already found all the geocaches there, but the mountain had 3 landmarks, government reference points used by surveyors and developers to mark property boundaries. These landmarks, often metal rods and concrete, were a side challenge for avid geocachers. I decided to find all 3 that day, taking my GPS and metal detector with me. Finding a piece of rebar in the woods is tough, and I needed all the help I could get. The GPS would lead me close to the spot. Much of Hayes Mountain was part of the Madison Land Trust, spanning almost 2,000 acres and constantly seeking expansion. Most of the surrounding vacant land was filled with subdivisions and industrial parks, leaving the trust to rely on donations to stay afloat. Next to the trust's parking lot stood an orchard alongside a farmhouse marked with a large "For Sale" sign. After parking, I walked over to the fence bordering the orchard to take a closer look. It was disheartening to think that this beautiful estate might soon be demolished for new development. "Are you planning to buy it or just admiring it?" An old man in overalls and a John Deere baseball cap asked as he approached. "If I had $1 million, I'd gladly take it off your hands," I replied. We both chuckled at the thought. "Do you think you'll have trouble selling it?" I inquired. There's been interest, but I'm holding on as long as I can, he said, a hint of reluctance in his voice. Why's that? I asked. I was hoping the land trust would buy it, but they don't have the funds. They want to keep the fruit trees untouched, which is fine by me. Developers, though, want to level everything. I think this property would be a great addition to what the trust already owns. How can the trust compete with big companies? I asked. I offered them a deal. The listing price is $1 million, but I'd sell to them for $600,000. The problem is they can't seem to raise that much. If they can't within 90 days, I'll have to sell to that developer who calls me every week. He's a real pest, he explained. An option isn't the same as a sale, right? I asked for clarification. Right. The buyer pays for an option, which guarantees he can buy the land within 6 months for $1 million. If he can't come up with the money, he loses the option fee. It's a good deal for me, but I don't want him to have it. He already has the $1 million locked in, so he's safe. But he needs all 6 properties to make the deal work, which is why he's paying more than market value. What happens if you don't sell him the option? I probed further. He'll lose everything. The land trust isn't likely to come up with the money, so Keystone seems set to win. But if he misses out on this lot, the whole deal collapses, and he loses the money he's already spent on the other options, probably about $1 million. His investors will abandon him. If I had the money, I'd help, I said. Yeah, that's what they all say, he replied, shaking his head with a hint of cynicism. We laughed again, and I headed out for my hike. The landmarks were spaced about 1 mile apart as the crow flies, but the hike was double that. The first 2 markers were easy to find, standard surveyor's stakes. The third was much older and harder to locate. When I found it, it turned out to be a small brick monument with a bronze plaque, hidden under years of leaves and debris. I took a picture to post online. That moment changed everything for me. The metal detector I carried was still on, and as I moved away from the marker, it beeped faintly. I put on my headset and began scanning an area about 10 feet south of the landmark. The signal pointed to a spot, and I carefully started to dig. Finding metal deep in the woods is rare. Within 5 minutes, I unearthed a small iron box wrapped in heavily oiled canvas. Although rusty, it was still solid. The lock was made of heavy bronze and still intact. Usually, finds like this on public land should be turned over to the authorities or a historical society, but that didn't feel right this time. I put the box in my bag and went home. On the way, I couldn't stop wondering what it held. Gold coins were my first thought. Maybe old documents from the Civil War or even earlier. The possibilities seemed endless. At home, I cleared the kitchen table, took out my tools, and examined the box. I didn't want to break the lock, but had no choice since I couldn't figure out how else to open it. I had no idea if the mechanism inside was still functional. I used bolt cutters to snap the lock. Inside, wrapped in another piece of oiled canvas, were 12 pennies. Why would someone bury 12 pennies? These weren't ordinary coins, but old, large cents. The newest was from 1814, the oldest from 1793. They were in remarkably good condition, with dates clearly visible and no green corrosion common on aged copper. I'd never been interested in collecting large cents, preferring to spend money on newer Indian head cents. However, I had an old book my grandfather gave me called The Quirks of the Penny, detailing varieties of large cent designs. I'd always found it dull since I didn't own any large cents, so it had sat gathering dust for 30 years. Tonight, it would finally be useful. I stayed up until dawn with my grandfather's book and a magnifying glass, using my scanner to take high-resolution photos of each coin. Every crack and mark was clearly visible, revealing their pristine condition. I went to bed and slept until noon. I called work to check in, and they mentioned that Phil Williams, one of the company executives, had asked about me. But they didn't have any more details. I had more pressing matters to deal with, so I left it at that. I knew I'd need to visit the bank for a safe deposit box. After spending a few hours online, I discovered that my pennies were worth several $1 million. Their value wasn't just in their age, but in their condition and rare varieties. I started to understand why money laundering was so difficult for criminals. Turning valuable items into cash wouldn't be simple. It would require careful effort. While eating breakfast at IHOP, I saw another photo of Marcy and Clayton in the newspaper, this time at an art gallery opening. She wore a black cocktail dress and held a glass of wine or champagne, both smiling for the camera. Seeing that photo made my next step clear. After securing a safe deposit box, I called John Smurd and asked him to hold off on making any decisions about the land for a few days. He seemed content with the call. I visited the land trust office to learn how to make a donation, and they were more than eager to help. The final divorce date was 4 weeks away, and for some reason, that deadline felt significant. I spent the rest of the day researching coin dealers and auction houses, not looking for advertisements, but for lawsuits. Eventually, I chose Towers and Burns in New York City. They had strong finances and experience handling controversial sales discreetly. I scheduled a meeting for Monday afternoon and called my daughters to ask them to keep Monday morning free for lunch. The front of the Towers and Burns office presented a sleek, modern showroom filled with glass, light, and collectibles, showcasing various numismatic items. After I provided my last name, a staff member escorted me to a less glamorous area of the building. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I hear you have some interesting coins to show us. Is this your first time in the city?" James Towers greeted me, looking about 10 years older than his photographs. "Thank you. My daughters attend Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never for business," I replied as I settled into a stiff-backed chair across from him. "I don't doubt your knowledge, but don't you have someone on staff who specializes in early copper coins? Their input would be valuable," he suggested. "I'm not offended, and I agree." I watched as he pressed the intercom on his desk. "Marie, ask Cookson to join us," he instructed. Maurice Cookson, known for his expertise on large cents and half cents, soon entered the room. He looked older than his photos, as many do. "Gentlemen," I began, "I'm presenting 12 special coins for sale. I'll be offering 4 today and hope to leave the 5th with you for evaluation. The remaining 7 will be sold later. I believe 6 of these coins may qualify for conditional census status, but I'll let Mr. Cookson confirm that. Since high-condition cents are rare on the market, I hope you'll be interested." "Where did you get these coins?" James inquired. "They were left to me by my grandfather," I explained. "No offense, Mr. Simmons, but that's quite a story. Can you show us something?" He pressed. I placed 4 high-resolution photos on the table, each showing both sides of the coins, enlarged to 5 times their actual size. James and Maurice examined them closely for several minutes before James broke the silence. "What's your estimate for these 4?" he asked. "Recent auction results suggest they could go for about $1.3 million as a set," I replied. "I thought closer to $1 million, but your estimate isn't unreasonable," Maurice interjected, demonstrating his expertise. "I'm only asking for $800,000, but the transaction needs to be handled a specific way," I added, sensing their interest. James leaned back in his chair, smiling. "We can manage that. What do you have in mind?" I handed him a letter from the Land Trust, explaining how to make a land donation, along with an advertisement for John Smurd's orchard. "I want you to buy this piece of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The cost is $600,000. You'll get a substantial tax deduction and gain humanitarian recognition. I'll take the rest in cash," I outlined. "Please give us a moment," James said. He and Maurice moved to the other side of the room for a brief discussion. After a few moments, Maurice left and James returned. "Do you have the coins with you?" he asked. "Yes, I do. I also have a 5th coin I'd like to leave with you for safekeeping," I confirmed. Mr. Cookson returned to the table, carrying a purple Crown Royal bag. This time he spoke up. "We're willing to meet your conditions for the first part of the deal, and hope you'll meet ours for the second." He poured the contents of the bag onto the table, revealing nearly 100 coins, mostly gold with a few silver ones mixed in. "This collection is worth about $300,000 at retail. For various reasons we won't go into, it's hard for us to sell them directly, but you shouldn't have any trouble. I understand you've sold coins on eBay before. Is that correct?" I nodded in confirmation. "These coins, passed down from your grandfather, should sell easily, and we'll both come out ahead. I guarantee you won't face any issues," he said, giving me a knowing wink. After considering the proposal, I agreed. I handed the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we all shook hands. "Now, Mr. Simmons, tell us about this 5th coin," Towers prompted. I held up the photo and addressed Mr. Cookson. "What's the highest-rated 1793 strawberry leaf scent you've ever seen?" "I've never seen one in person, but I believe the highest grade is about fair 12, he replied. "I graded this one at an 8, but I'm not an expert," I said, gauging their reactions. Cookson didn't look at the photo. Instead, he focused on my expression while he and Towers both tried to catch a glimpse of the image. Cookson was grinning broadly, and I could see excitement in Towers' eyes. "How much?" Towers asked eagerly. "Best offer if you can figure out how to pay me," I responded. "Would you like a cup of coffee, Mr. Simmons?" Cookson inquired. "Yes, black would be great," I answered. They left the room with the photograph, and and a few minutes later, a young woman entered with my coffee. "Mr. Towers will be back shortly. He's making some phone calls. Are you all right?" she asked. I nodded and took a sip of my coffee. Half an hour later, Towers returned with a stunning woman. She had dark eyes, jet black hair, and appeared to be of Middle Eastern descent, no older than 30. Well-dressed and exuding authority, she struck me as vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place her. "Hello, I'm Letitia Rothberg. Do you have a passport, Mr. Simmons?" Her voice was deep yet feminine. "Yes," I replied. "Good. We'll be heading to JFK soon to set up an offshore bank account for you. Do you have anything for Mr. Towers?" I handed James the 1793 strawberry leaf scent, and his face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Thank you," he said as he exited the room, clearly elated. Though we hadn't agreed on a price, I still had 7 coins the Towers wanted. He agreed to keep the smaller collection of coins safe until I returned. An hour later, Letitia and I were already on a plane to the Cayman Islands. She barely spoke during the flight, and when we arrived at the airport, photographers eagerly snapped her picture. She looked annoyed, but managed a pleasant smile. It was my first time flying first class, and the flight felt all too brief. A bright yellow mini SUV was waiting at the terminal. Letitia didn't hesitate to pull up her skirt as she slid into the driver's seat, and I couldn't help but notice her tanned legs. She caught me looking and seemed amused. 20 minutes later, we parked in the garage of a mid-sized condominium. Letitia owned the entire building, using the top floor as her apartment. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Simmons?" she asked as she walked toward the kitchen. "A beer would be nice," I replied. Watching her leave the room was just as intriguing as her earlier moves at the airport. Although it wasn't my style to admire younger women, Letitia was exceptional. When she returned, we stepped out onto a balcony with an ocean view. It was breathtaking, though the wind was stronger than I preferred. I had the impression she was trying to impress me with the grandeur of the place. It was beautiful, but my main focus remained on setting up the bank account. "You don't talk much, Mr. Simmons." "Surely you have some questions," Letitia said, glancing at me. It struck me as odd that someone of her stature would drink beer from a bottle. I pictured her more as a champagne or martini type, but here she was. I figured that habit wouldn't suit her for long. "I usually prefer to wait, but I suppose you could tell me why we needed to come here," I said. "To open a bank account. It's simple, safe, and secure." "I think it's a good fit for you," she explained. "It's just 1 coin," I reminded her. "Yes, but you have 7 more," Letitia pointed out. "I'm sorry, but this still feels excessive," I replied, relieved when we went back inside, away from the wind. "Can you handle this? I brought you here to be my Zek's slave for a few days," she joked. The comment surprised me and made me smile. I knew it was a jest, but found it amusing nonetheless. She was witty, beautiful, and wealthy. What more could a man wish for? If only I were 10 years younger. "It's no good teasing an old man," I said with a chuckle. We both laughed softly at the exchange. "Come on, Mr. Simmons, let's go get some fresh lobster for dinner," she suggested. We finished our beers and left. The restaurant and meal were excellent, though I didn't care much for the wine she chose. I tried to be polite about it. "What's wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons? Was I that obvious?" Letitia asked. "I'm sorry, it was reflexive. When I was 18, I got sick on cheap white wine. It was the worst experience I've ever had. Now just the smell or taste of white wine makes me nauseous. I can't explain it," I admitted. "It's good wine, but don't worry about it," she replied, brushing off my concerns. 5 minutes later, we both had cold beers again. Strangely, we didn't talk much during the meal. At the end, we shared fruit sorbet and coffee. "Tell me about yourself. Are you married? Do you have kids? What's your job? We have all night, and I'm curious about what brought us here," Letitia prompted. "That's a lot to cover. I have 2 daughters who are both studying at Columbia University, majoring in international banking or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. I just pay the bills," I explained. "That's interesting. I have a master's from Columbia and sometimes lecture there. I'd love to meet them. Have you seen them lately?" she asked. "I had lunch with them today. They hate it when I make them miss class," I replied with a smile. "You must have married young if you have 2 daughters in college," she observed. "That sounds like a pickup line," I replied, feeling comfortable around this Mediterranean beauty. I could have talked all night. "I'm currently separated from my wife," I added, the word feeling strange as it left my mouth. "She left for a wealthy businessman, someone who develops malls or office buildings. He has an expensive car and a fancy apartment. She told me she wanted a different life. The divorce will be final in about 4 weeks." That's a silly reason to leave, Letitia remarked. It was a good marriage, or so I thought. Everything was fine until she met him. I guess she was never really happy with my job. I had chances to advance, but she refused to move. I didn't love it, but I stayed put to save our marriage. Now I feel like I've lost everything, I confessed. And what do you do? She asked, genuinely curious. There was an awkward pause. How do you tell a successful, beautiful woman that you manage a grocery store? She noticed my hesitation and spoke up. It's okay, we don't have to talk about it now, Letitia said kindly. No, it's fine. I'm not ashamed of what I do, it's just that being a grocery manager doesn't exactly impress most people. My daughters don't mind, but my wife often avoided mentioning it. I could tell it bothered her, I explained. Do you like your job? She inquired. Yes, and I'm good at it, I replied confidently. The server returned with more coffee and cleared the table. Mr. Simmons, we've only just met, but I believe first impressions are important. Briefly, what's your first impression of me? Letitia asked. It was an awkward question. If I answered truthfully, I could push her away. If I flattered her, she might see through it and think I was being dishonest. What to say? In short, you're beautiful, smart, educated, and confident, I said. She tilted her head slightly and looked at me with a small smile. I was hoping for honesty, she replied. I'm sorry, but we've had such a nice evening. I didn't want to ruin it, I explained. Do you really think so poorly of me? I don't want you to hold back or resent me. Maybe that's why your wife left. If you hadn't always tried to please her, maybe your marriage would have been stronger, Letitia suggested, her eyes searching mine for sincerity. It was blunt, but it rang true. I took a deep breath. Miss Rothberg, I think you're manipulative. You use your looks and charm to get what you want. You're accustomed to having your way and seem a bit spoiled. You play with men but avoid real commitment. However, I can tell you're savvy with money and smart with your investments. If you weren't so intent on proving yourself equal to any man, I think you'd make a great mother. A silence fell between us as she absorbed my words. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Do you really think I'd make a good mother? The tension eased and the mood lifted. The short drive back to the condo was pleasant. She had heard everything I said and accepted it without arguing. She asked for honesty, and I delivered. That she wasn't upset made me feel better about it. My night as Letitia Rothberg's so-called Zek's slave turned out to be uneventful. It's hard to be a Zek's slave when you sleep in separate rooms, which was fine by me since I hadn't expected anything. The next morning, I woke up first to find breakfast ready, a spread of fruit danishes, hot coffee, and a copy of the Wall Street Journal. With the wind having died down, I took a seat on the balcony overlooking the Caribbean and enjoyed the calm. Letitia joined me about 20 minutes later, teasingly snatching part of the newspaper. We read and drank coffee together, as if we had been doing it for years. My phone doesn't work here, and I'd really like to call my daughters, I said, glancing at her. Letitia handed me her phone. Go ahead. I dialed Cindy's number. Cindy, it's Dad. Where are you? Is everything okay? The caller ID says London. I'm in the Caymans, and everything's fine. I wanted to let you know I didn't come straight home. I'm staying with a friend and had to use her phone, she explained. They showed a picture of you on TV last night boarding a plane with Letitia Rothberg. What on earth are you doing with her? She's the friend I'm staying with. What's the big deal? I replied, trying to sound casual. Why are you with her? Cindy pressed. Everything's fine. Nothing shady is happening, I reassured her. Dad, that woman is a barracuda. She devours men for breakfast, she warned. Just then, Letitia walked in with another tray and caught my eye. I couldn't help but smile. This is my daughter, Cindy, from New York. She just told me to be careful because you're a barracuda. Cindy groaned loudly over the phone, and I could hear her and Sandy talking quickly in the background. Why are you there? How do you know her? When are you coming home? Cindy asked urgently. Before I could respond, Letitia reached for the phone. Hi, Cindy. This is Letitia. Your father told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and would love to have lunch with you both. Where should I pick you up? There was a brief pause before Cindy replied, No problem. I'll pick you up at your classroom at 11. Okay, I'll tell you. Goodbye. Letitia handed the phone back to me. Your daughter says goodbye. I'll have lunch with them tomorrow. I promise to be nice, even if they think I'm a barracuda. She laughed softly, swayed her hips playfully, and walked back to her room. An hour later, we arrived at the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands. With Letitia's assistance, I opened my first offshore account, which was immediately credited with $4 million from Towers and Burns. That seemed fair for 12 rare pennies. During dinner, Letitia arranged for a friend to take us out to feed manta rays. I asked her why she worked at Towers and Burns, only to find out she owned 60% of the company. "What else can you tell me about yourself? It looks like you're a major player in global finance, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know more about you," I said. "I was born and raised in London. My father is Israeli, and my mother is Turkish. I have an MBA from Columbia University and sometimes lecture there. I'm not married, though I've been engaged twice. I haven't had a serious relationship in over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. Most of them want something from me, but offer nothing in return. I guess you could say I'm cynical," she explained. "That's unfortunate. I was hoping to get a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me?" I asked, half joking. "Be serious, you goof," she replied with a smile. "Sorry if I sounded insensitive. That wasn't my intent. It's hard for me to relate to that kind of problem, but I'll try to be better," I promised. "Okay, let's put that aside. We have a party to get to," she said, redirecting the conversation. We ended the night at a cocktail party at a prominent hotel. Everyone seemed to know Letitia and treated her like a celebrity. I spent most of the night trying to blend into the background, still in my travel clothes from New York. I hadn't anticipated attending a high-profile event. At first, Letitia stayed close to me out of obligation, but I encouraged her to enjoy herself, finding a comfortable spot near a decorative palm tree. I noticed she checked on me frequently. I ended up talking to 2 Hispanic gentlemen who were cattle ranchers from Argentina. The conversation shifted from soccer to fishing, conducted in English for my benefit. One of them commented on Letitia's beauty, not realizing I was her guest for the evening. I felt a strange, quiet pride. I mainly contributed to the conversation with nods and polite smiles, unsure of what else to say. However, when Ramon Duarte, one of the ranchers, mentioned his plans for heavy investments in winter wheat, I couldn't help but react. Despite my attempt to remain neutral, I sensed my expression might have betrayed my thoughts. "Mr. Simmons, I can tell you have reservations about my strategy," Ramon said, catching my eye. I fumbled for a response. "I'm not much of an investor and don't really grasp the complexities." "Maybe, but you seem to have an opinion. Share it," he urged. Feeling cornered, I took a breath. "I need a fresh drink," Ramon persisted, so I found myself explaining what I had read in the Wall Street Journal. I detailed how the strong winter wheat crop in Alberta and Saskatchewan would offset the poor U.S. yield. The Canadian Grain Board had leased silos in North and South Dakota and secured rail cars. I predicted that within a week, winter wheat futures would drop before the market stabilized, pushing Canada and the U.S. to export the surplus. Ramon and his friend listened closely. Just as I was running out of things to say, Letitia appeared beside me, her eyes curious. "What was that, Gary?" she asked with a playful smile. "We were talking about food," I replied with a grin. "About groceries," I thought, holding back a laugh. She took my hand and led me away, leaving the ranchers disappointed. The next morning, we flew back to New York. Letitia was met by a crowd of photographers at the airport, eager to capture her arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns met me with a small package containing the coins I had left. Letitia and I said our goodbyes, and I caught the commuter train back to Huntsville. The divorce and sale of the house went smoothly. Phil Williams from the main office had left several messages for me, and I finally accepted a job offer to move to New York and work at headquarters. John Smurd also left a message suggesting lunch. He had heard about the land deal, but didn't know the full story. I gathered my things from my work locker and wished my coworkers good luck. That day, I saw a newspaper photo of Marcy and Clayton at a barbecue hosted by a local politician, looking like the perfect couple. The coins I'd auctioned sold for much more than expected. Cookson's original estimate of $300,000 was low. The auction prices would likely exceed $200,000 easily. In 2 weeks, I'd be free of my old life. What once seemed like a disaster now felt like the start of something new. I met John Smurd for lunch, where he expressed his gratitude for involving Clayton but was confused as to why I didn't seem to benefit from it. Explaining everything was too complex, so I let it go. Before we parted, he handed me the deed for 5 acres of land. He and his wife were moving to Florida, and he wanted to settle his affairs. "No good deed goes unrewarded," he said, patting me on the back. Soon after, my cell phone rang. Cindy called to tell me that she and Sandy were flying into Nashville. I had plenty of time to pick them up. Flights to Nashville were cheaper than to Huntsville, so they were being economical. On the drive, Cindy couldn't stop talking about Letitia. "Dad, you won't believe this," Cindy said excitedly. "During our finance class, the professor paused to introduce a guest speaker. It was Letitia. She spotted us in the crowd and invited us to lunch at the Westin Hotel." "So, did you like her?" I asked, a hint of amusement in my voice. "She's amazing! How did you even meet her?" Cindy's eyes were wide with excitement. "Well," I said with a grin, "she needed a sex slave and I was her first choice." Sandy smacked my arm from the back seat. "Dad, be serious." Okay. What did you talk about at lunch?" I asked, shifting gears. "She asked about our classes and studies. And Dad, we think she's interested in more than just being friends with you," Sandy said, laughing. "I'm 10 years older than she is and a lot poorer. I'm sorry, girls, but she's out of my league," I replied, trying to keep it real. "Daddy, she could have any man she wants." "Why you? Think about it," Cindy pointed out. "Maybe your mother didn't really know me either," I said impulsively. The car fell silent as I glanced at my daughters and saw their pained expressions. "I'm sorry, that was unfair," I quickly added. "Don't worry, Dad," Cindy said gently. "We understand more than you think." A few miles later, as we crossed into Alabama, Sandy's phone rang. "Hello? Yes, we just arrived. Everything's fine." "You're kidding. That's great. I'll tell him. Thanks. Bye." She leaned forward, beaming. "Guess what, Dad? Letitia's coming to Huntsville on Tuesday. She said you owe her breakfast in bed." I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Letitia's visit sounded perfect, but I wasn't sure what I was getting into. The weekend with the girls was great. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mom, but didn't meet Clayton. I asked them not to mention Letitia. We sorted out everything they wanted to leave at the house. By the time they left, we had packed it all up. I made an advance payment for storage until they finished school. On the drive back to Nashville, they made me promise to try to get along with Letitia. When I asked what they meant, Cindy said, "Just don't make her mad." That seemed simple enough. They were excited about my move to the city. I still didn't understand what Letitia wanted with an older man who didn't even own an Armani suit. When I got home, I settled down with a beer and the Sunday paper. There were no pictures of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a short article about Keystone Development struggling to finance a local project. Winter wheat futures had hit a record low. This caught my attention. I called Terry Davis and invited him over. It wasn't lunch, but I figured we could chat over a couple of beers. Clayton Manning's past was mixed, to say the least. Over the years, he had oscillated between wealth and financial trouble, frequently relocating to stay ahead of creditors and people who lent him money. His new project was failing, and his investors and supporters were pulling out. I don't remember a beer ever tasting so satisfying. Monday morning went better than expected. The coins I had put up for auction were selling for far more than anticipated. Cookson had valued them at around $300,000, but they were likely to exceed $200,000. In just over 2 weeks, I would be free of my old life. What once felt like a disaster now looked like a fresh start. The buyers of the house had secured their financing and were ready to close. It was ironic that Marcy seemed so comfortable with Clayton that she didn't take any of our shared belongings. I wondered if she realized how uncertain her future was. At 3 p.m., I met with the buyers of the house. A $200,000 check went straight into my offshore account. They had no problem letting me stay in the house for another week, which worked for both sides. The next morning, before I even had my coffee, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The caller informed me that Miss Rothberg would be arriving at 10:45 a.m. on Delta Flight 724. I arrived 30 minutes early, feeling a bit anxious. Paparazzi had caught wind of her arrival and were waiting outside the terminal. Trying to stay unnoticed, I parked in the short-term lot, unprepared for the attention. Instead of waiting for me, Letitia chose to walk with me to the car. Naturally, the photographers noted my license plate, and the secret was out. I wasn't used to such attention, but Letitia didn't seem bothered at all. On the way home, she apologized for the scene. I couldn't help but recall that as she got off the plane, I wanted to kiss her. Silly old man. I felt embarrassed by how bare the house was. Over the past few months, I had gotten rid of almost everything. All that remained were the essentials that the new owner agreed to take over after I moved out. Letitia seemed amused by my attempts to apologize for the emptiness. With nothing to eat in the house, we made a quick stop at Taco Bell, her choice. I promised her Dreamland ribs for dinner. It was refreshing to be with a woman who enjoyed her food. "Letitia, I'm glad you're here, but I don't understand why." "I thought you'd be busy with work," I said, trying to make sense of her presence. This is work, silly. I heard you're moving to New York next week. You need a place to stay, and I have a spare room. I'm also here to help you pack. A truck will arrive tomorrow morning to move whatever doesn't fit in your car. Just no furniture, she explained casually. Come on, how did you know I was moving? I asked, surprised. That's what I do. If I pay attention to the small things, the big ones take care of themselves, she replied with a grin. It's nonsense, but I've always wanted to say that, I joked. Have you been talking to my daughters? I tried to smile innocently, but at my age it was hard to pull off. Her offer was unexpected, but I couldn't think of a reason to refuse it. Okay, let's get some boxes and start packing. I figured she'd be more at ease in a boardroom or a bank, but she genuinely seemed to enjoy talking with me. Still, I felt a little awkward about the age gap. We ended up throwing out more things than we packed. She had opinions about my wardrobe and didn't care for my protests. Once settled in New York, she promised to take me shopping for more suitable clothes. When we finished packing, there were more boxes than could fit in my car, but not enough to fill a moving truck. I hoped she had ordered a smaller vehicle. I kept my laptop and inkjet printer aside for an upcoming eBay auction. Just as we were getting ready for dinner, a surprise arrived. A delivery van parked out front, and a driver in a sharp uniform stepped out with a clipboard. Are you Gary Simmons? He asked. Yes, I replied, intrigued. I have a delivery for you. Where would you like it? He inquired. What is this? I asked, puzzled. It's the car. From Mr. Ramon Duarte. Is there space in the garage? The empty spot where Marcy's Volvo used to be was available, so I pointed and nodded. Letitia covered her mouth, giggling, clearly entertained by my confusion. Minutes later, I found myself staring at a bright orange sports car parked next to my old Volvo. What is this? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. With pride, the driver said, a 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider Super Leggera. Isn't it stunning? Letitia stifled her laughter, clearly amused by the spectacle. I signed the delivery form, still unsure of what to do with the gift, but certain it wouldn't be coming with me to New York. Get in the Volvo, little Miss Funny Pants, I said, shaking my head as we drove off. I ordered a full rack of ribs and 2 Fosters. Mind explaining the car situation? I asked Letitia, raising an eyebrow. Ramon invested heavily in winter wheat. People thought he was crazy, but as the price dropped, he doubled down on contracts. Within a week, he made over $40 million. He's happy about the profit, but even more thrilled with the recognition for his savvy move, she explained. Well, good for Ramon. I hope he didn't mention me, I replied. He respects you and wanted to show his appreciation, but wouldn't do so without your approval. He did ask for your address, though I didn't know he planned this, she said, taking a bite of her ribs. As I watched Letitia dip them in Tabasco sauce and dig in, I couldn't help but think how much I adored that woman. You know I'm sending it back tomorrow, right? I stated firmly, still trying to process everything. I figured. Don't worry, Ramon won't be offended. He probably guessed you'd refuse money, so he gifted the car instead, hoping you'd feel obliged to keep it. We needed more beers because of the Tabasco. I felt great and didn't want the evening to end. At that moment, I would have given anything to spend the night with her. I envied those suave men who could charm any woman in minutes. For me, the best I could hope for was a goodnight kiss. Eventually, we had to call it a night. The next morning was incredible. My worries had been for nothing. As we walked into the house, Letitia took my hand and led me to the bedroom. Being a gentleman, I made sure her needs came first, which led to the most fulfilling night of my life. Breakfast in bed consisted of coffee, juice, and danishes. I'm sorry, but given the situation, it's the best I can do, I said sheepishly. He's as good as I could have hoped for, she replied. Eating off a tray in bed felt awkward, and after some laughter and adjustments, we moved to the kitchen. While breakfast in bed sounds nice, it's rarely practical. Letitia, I don't mean to ruin the moment, but I really need to know why you chose me. I don't have much to offer, and you deserve more, I said, genuinely curious. I've been hurt too many times by smooth-talking, flashy types. I'm not going down that road again, she explained. Ah, so you like me because I'm not one of those players? I asked, a smile creeping onto my face. This made her laugh a little. Gary, I was impressed by how you handled the deal with James in New York. I just sold a few coins, I shrugged. It wasn't just that. I thought your plan to buy the trust land was interesting. Do you see me as a philanthropist? She asked, tilting her head. Not at all. I think you're a clever operator who took advantage of an opportunity to get back at your wife's lover. That made me smile again. I was amazed at her sharpness and how well she hit it. Was that wrong? She asked playfully. No, Gary, it was genius. I was impressed and wanted to learn more about you, she admitted. There's no way you knew what I was up to in New York, I said, raising an eyebrow. I knew what you did, but I didn't know why until a few days later, she replied with a hint of mischief. You were checking up on me, I stated, half joking. Of course, I'm not naive, she said with a smirk. I have to admit, the ego boost felt good. Unfortunately, Letitia was flying back to New York early the next morning. I hated to see her leave, but she departed with a happy heart and the key to her apartment. The Lamborghini dealer couldn't pick up the car until the next day, which was fine since I wasn't planning to drive it. The movers arrived with a small truck to take my things to New York. Meanwhile, Terry Davis called to tell me that Keystone Development was in serious trouble. Clayton had suddenly lost nearly all his backers. Rumors swirled about unpaid debts. That evening, my soon-to-be ex-wife paid me a visit. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? I couldn't help but let sarcasm slip in. I need to talk about some things, she said, her tone serious. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help however I can, I replied, trying to remain cordial. I was going to take the old Volvo, but it's gone. What's that orange car in the garage? Things were about to get interesting. I'm sorry, Marcy. When you said you didn't want the Volvo, I sold it back to the dealer. He might still have it if you want to check. Damn. I never heard Marcy curse before. The orange car was a gift, but I'm returning it tomorrow. I can't picture myself driving something like that. The sticker price was $225,000, I added nonchalantly. Who gives a gift like that? Your new girlfriend? She asked. Her curiosity piqued. No, it was from an Argentinian cattle rancher I helped a few weeks ago. It was just his way of saying thanks. So, what else do you need? I asked. There was a pause, and it was clear Marcy had something on her mind but didn't know how to say it. Want something to drink? I have beer and diet sodas, I offered. No, I can't stay long, she replied. How did you get here? I don't see a car, I pointed out. I took a cab, she said, glancing away. Gary, you said you're leaving in a few days. Could I stay at the house for a while? She asked tentatively. The house is sold. We closed yesterday and the new owners will start moving in this weekend. They're letting me stay until Friday, but that's all, I explained. What about the apartment by the river? She pressed. She didn't respond. After a brief silence, she asked, what happened to the money from the house sale? Now it was getting interesting, and I liked where this conversation was going. It's all gone. You were clear that you didn't want anything. I used it to set up my new apartment, I said, watching her reaction. Where are you moving? She inquired. To New York. I got a promotion and a big raise. I'm starting there on Monday, I replied, deciding not to mention that I'd be living with Letitia or about the offshore account in the Caymans. You never said what happened to the apartment, she pointed out. It was only a lease. The landlord didn't renew it, I explained, keeping my tone neutral. So where are you staying now? She pressed. We're at the Holiday Inn until Clayton finds a new place, I replied. I see. Now I understood why she wanted to move back into our old house. Marcy seemed a bit lost. She wanted to ask for help, but didn't know how. Another pause followed. Is there anything else I can do for you? I asked, trying to help her along. Can you give me a ride to the Holiday Inn? She requested, breaking the silence. The first part of the drive was quiet. I heard you have a girlfriend. Tell me about her, she said, trying to fill the void. She's not really a girlfriend, more of a business associate, I clarified. What kind of business? You don't do any business, she replied, skepticism creeping into her voice. You're right. I'm just a grocery store clerk. You see right through me, don't you? I said, trying to keep the mood light. Marcy said nothing, staring out the window. I barely heard her mutter, Fool! This was the perfect moment to release all my frustration, to tell her how much seeing those pictures in the papers had hurt me. But instead, I just smiled to myself. She was in a tough spot, and I had come out ahead. I felt a brief pang of guilt, but it passed quickly. I dropped her off at the motel entrance. She walked away without looking back or saying goodbye. I hated to admit it, but there was a sense of satisfaction in that moment. The week was going well. On Thursday morning, I unexpectedly received the final divorce papers. They had come early, but who was I to complain? The front page of the Huntsville newspaper featured a photo of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport, holding hands with yours truly. Each room at the Holiday Inn gets a complimentary newspaper, so Marcy would see it at breakfast. I was certain Clayton would fill her in on who Letitia was. I emptied my safety deposit box at the bank, knowing those 7 pennies would be useful soon. I had expected Letitia to ask about them while she was visiting, but she never did. Our conversation stayed strictly social. If she had any business interest in me, she didn't show it. I set buy-it-now prices on all my auction coins, and more than half sold at that price. I spent the rest of the day packing up the sold coins and prepping them for shipment to the post office. The remaining auction items were scheduled to close by noon on Friday. Assuming all the PayPal payments cleared, the remaining coins would be shipped the same day. Any problematic buyers would have to wait until Monday. By early Saturday morning, I was on my way. Most of the money in my PayPal account had been transferred to my Cayman account, though I left a small balance in case I spotted something I wanted to buy. The new owners of the house arrived just as I was leaving, making it a win-win situation for both of us. The drive north was expected to take about 12 hours without delays. Letitia was at the apartment and had promised a home-cooked dinner for my arrival. I wondered who would actually be cooking it. It felt good knowing I still had what it took to win the heart of such a stunning woman, and I was confident I could meet her expectations. I was just crossing the Virginia state line on Interstate 81 when Cindy called. Apparently, Clayton Manning had skipped town, leaving Marcy stranded with no car, no place to stay, no money, and a large motel bill. I asked Cindy what she thought I should do. She laughed and said, "Smile.